Every time I smell this, I get surprised by how Meo Fusciuni expertly leverages the language of perfumery. Hello, welcome back to Seldomly Often. I'm Daniel, today we're taking fragrances, and this is a practical review of Meo Fusciuni's Sogni. These reviews are for fragrances I have a lot of experience with, multiple wears in many situations, and I'm meant to give you a general idea of what it feels to wear the fragrance. As per usual, I do a lot of research before buying fragrances, but I don't really like to go into details about notes and accords, as I don't think that they help the end user. I'd rather talk about the wear experience as a whole. We're back at it with another one from a house which is quickly becoming one of my favorite brands ever. The house of Meo Fusciuni never disappoints. Every time I wear one of his fragrances, I get completely overwhelmed by emotions. I get transported to the places which he talks about and writes poetry about. Everything about the house of Meo Fusciuni to me is a win. And especially the way Giuseppe Imprezzabile, the perfumer for Meo Fusciuni, puts together his fragrances is, to me, it's second to none. The amount of effort, the amount of dedication, the amount of expertise, the amount of intent he puts behind his creations is super unique, and I've never seen anything like it. Giuseppe Imprezzabile to me is basically what a true artist really is. He really spaces through the various medias and the various arts. He really owns them all. And you would think that perfumery is where he excels, but to me perfumery is actually where he manages to funnel all of the creativity and all of the expertise that he has in the other arts. And also, as he puts it, his perfumery is actually more like notes and experiences from his travels and from his life in general. Giuseppe Imprezzabile is a very particular type of character. If you've seen him in pictures, if you've seen him in interviews, he has a lot of charisma, but he is very subtle, very understated, and very timid. And he has this very delicate, gentle facet to him. The way he talks, his tone of voice, his choice of words, everything is incredibly calculated, so soft, so delicate, so emotional in a way. And this might just be me being a fanboy, and I completely accept it. I am biased, I'm a huge fan of his. His work really captivates me, and again, as I said, this is easily and quickly becoming one of my favorite houses in perfumery ever. And although I have 7 bottles of Meo Fusciuni, they're all super unique. They all speak to me in unique ways, and I can't wait to acquire at least 2 more. Sogni, which in Italian means dreams, is arguably one of his most popular perfumes. It's easily one of the most recommended perfumes out there. It has a really good mix of accessibility and uniqueness. This really smells like nothing I've ever smelled before. It caught me off guard the first time I smelled it. I immediately fell in love because this was a scent profile that immediately clicked for me. And although I kind of knew what to expect from the reports and from the reviews online, when I first sprayed this on my skin, I was completely blown away. To put it simply, Sogni is Giuseppe's love letter to the land of Japan, and it really details all of his experiences from the country. The simple living, the smell of the cedar woods, the smell of the wood, the smell of the incense, the taste of rice, the sleeping on the floor, and just the quietness, the rediscovery of nature there. He really talks about nature in this and how nature kind of just takes over and really takes over the senses, and it puts you in this state of kind of confusion. It's really, really beautiful, and each of his creations, again, is so well thought out, it's so well designed and so well described that you can't help yourself, and you find yourself just simply connecting with his work, his emotions, his poetry, his way to see the world. It's absolutely beautiful. I absolutely love his work, and I can't stress enough how much these scents move me, how much they trigger me, and how much they just transport me to a specific type of location or a specific type of time. Something that I kind of need to preface when talking about Meo Fusciuni is the way I see his work. These are not really utilitarian fragrances. These are not meant to be worn to smell good. These are definitely not smell good fragrances. These are not perfumey perfumes, at least to me. These are a lot more valuable, and I tend to forgive a lot of shortcomings from the house. And for example, when I talked about Violinere, my other review from the house, which is absolutely a beautiful fragrance, I really highlighted the fact that the longevity was terrible, but I also said that the terrible longevity wasn't really an issue to me because these are art pieces in a bottle to me. So you really have to understand my point of view, because although I'll try to disclose everything and be as unbiased as possible, a lot of the reviews for Meo Fusciuni might have these sort of statements where I tend to overlook a shortcoming or a defect of the perfume just because I value the intent and the execution so much. And in the case of Sogni, although not to such a dramatic degree as in Violinere, we also have a wear experience that is a little bit peculiar, with a very harsh, very abrupt transition between the projecting phase and skin set phase. In Violinere, the low longevity kind of signified the very delicate nature of these beautiful violets. In this one here, I don't really understand it. But then again, I do forgive this fragrance because it's so beautifully put together as a whole. But we're going to talk about the wear experience after we cover the presentation. When it comes to presentation, Meo Fusciuni, to me, completely knocks that out of the park. Again, I might be biased. I really do like these bottles. I really like the way they look and they feel. They have a very subtle simplicity, which is very reminiscent of Giuseppe Impresabile's background. He is, after all, first and foremost, a chemist, and he is coming from chemistry. And these have an old-fashioned look about them, which screams ingredient bottle or maybe even chemical compound bottle. I really like the look. I really like the fact that they're darkly tinted, so you don't necessarily see the liquid content when they're sitting on a shelf, but you can also easily check the liquid content against any sort of light source. I really like the facet. Everything is super well balanced. The cap is absolutely beautiful. It's heavy, it's well made. It's fairly simple. It slides on with a friction-based action, but then again, I don't know, it just comes off as really well thought out, really well put together. It's beautiful. There's an engraving on top. The atomizer for these are super good. They have a very good combination of being a dispersive spray with a pressurized action, but also easy to aim, and they spray a ton of liquid. They're a joy to use. Let's give it a couple sprays. As I usually do when I film these reviews, I've been wearing this as my scent of the day. I've actually been wearing this as my scent of the day for the last couple days. I really like this, and I really needed a break from the usual massively projecting, overly strong type of fragrances. This is strong, don't get me wrong, but has this beautiful, delicate aura about it. Going back to the presentation and down to the bottle, the glass quality is very, very good. Yes, you can see a seam. It comes across as a little bit artisanal, for better or for worse, and that is also reflected in the label. The label is good, it's well stuck on, but it feels a little bit amateur in a way. I don't know, I don't mind it. The presentation to me is really good. It looks the part, especially if you have more than one bottle next to each other like I do. They really look cool. They really have this, again, they have this beautiful old school chemical lab type of vibe. Something that I have to highlight with the presentation of Meo Fusciuni, and I already did that for Violinere, is the box these come in. Not only the box is really cool, and I like the action, the way it opens up. On top of the box, you have a picture representing the fragrance. In this case, we have a Japanese arch that's sitting in the water. It's again, it's a perfume about Japan. It's about the experiences of Japan. So this is, again, a fairly standard picture. But what's important about the presentation, actually crucial in my opinion, to best experience this perfume, is actually the booklet that comes into each box. If you buy a Meo Fusciuni and you don't read the booklet, in my opinion, you're a little bit missing out on the whole concept, on the whole idea. Yes, you can wear these as perfumes and you'll totally be fine. But if you want the full experience, you definitely have to check this out. In these little booklets, you find notes, you find photographs, you find a brief description by Giuseppe, very beautiful stuff. You also find, which is very unique, his inspirational music when he was composing the fragrance, and the music he recommends as a listen while wearing the fragrance, maybe to get the full experience. Overall, these booklets and their content really help you connect with Giuseppe. They really help you connect with the perfume and connect with the experiences that led to this perfume. It's a beautiful addition to the box. It's a beautiful addition to the perfume experience as a whole, and it really manages to highlight the intent and the massive amount of effort that Giuseppe puts into every one of his creations. They're really, truly pieces of art that he really pours his heart and soul into. They're absolutely amazing. Again, I will not stop raving about this aspect. Closing off the presentation aspect, let's quickly touch upon the price. These fragrances are difficult to find at discounters, at least in Europe. In Switzerland, they're difficult to find, period. I was super lucky to buy 5 at an insanely cheap price when a shop in Zurich was dismissing the brand as a whole. They obviously are all gone. This was back in September, so yeah, don't ask me where because they're all gone. They normally retail on Giuseppe Impresabile's site, on Meo Fusciuni's site, for 220 euros for 100 ml. They're expensive, but not overly so. They will last you a long time. They're all fairly potent. Again, the longevity is a little bit hit or miss on some, but they're all fairly high quality and potent. I feel that the price is right, especially for again, the intent, how much Giuseppe put into these fragrances. Overall, I feel that the price is fairly justified, and I'm willing to pay full retail for the two that I still want in my collection that are a priority as of now. One is Luce and the other one is Buio. Okay, time to talk about the scent profile and wear experience. What does Sogni actually smell like? As I mentioned before, Sogni is basically a love letter to Japan and Giuseppe's experience in Japan. And if you read the booklet, he really goes into detail about all the experiences that led to this perfume. From him sleeping on the tatami mats, for him eating very simple food, in this case rice, which is a huge part of this fragrance, and overall the nature of Japan, the woodiness. And with the wood specifically, he talks about how the woods in here really remind him of the flow of life with their fibers and imperfections. You never really know what's around the corner. And again, it's so beautifully put together. Overall, I find the scent profile to be quite friendly and delicate, but also jarring at the same time. And I'm not really sure why people recommend this as the first Meo Fusciuni to sample, because the opening is incredibly stark. It's incredibly weird. It's really unusual, it's super unique, and it's like nothing I've ever smelled before. And if you read the notes, those are, again, a little bit deceiving in this case, because the notes are super delicate. You read stuff like rice, tatami, cedar, maybe pine needles, and all these like very subtle type of smells. But when you first spray this on, you're immediately hit with a very distinct, very unique smell of rice, I would say, or rice pudding. It has a very particular starchy, sweet, very complex type of smell. I would describe this as, again, maybe a mixture of rice or rice pudding with some sort of a sandalwood. It's incredibly creamy, it's incredibly lactonic. It's very, very strong. Again, it's almost off-puttingly strong. And the weird thing about the scent is that, as I mentioned before we covered the presentation, the wear experience for this is a little bit strange, meaning that the scent opens up incredibly loud, as I said, but it also fades off incredibly fast. Maybe that aspect, again, I have to a little bit criticize it because it's not as smooth as something like Sogni would suggest as a concept. But that being said, if you exclude that, the scent profile and general wear experience is very, very relaxing. Going back to the opening, as I mentioned, you get this really strange combination of like rice or rice pudding with this very clean, creamy sandalwood. And this whole thing comes across as a little bit weird. It's a little bit jarring because, again, I smelled, I think, another fragrance that had rice in it. I can't remember which one it was. Maybe it was Au Papier by Diptyque. Maybe that had paper. Maybe I'm getting confused. But anyway, the rice here is very, very prominent, and it stays prominent for quite a bit of time. This scent is overall linear and doesn't really transition much top to bottom. What you lose is this very creamy, very sweet rice component. And as the scent dries, as it typically happens, the scent becomes a lot smoother. You lose a lot of that sweetness from this rice thing, and the scent becomes a lot more dry, but dry in a flavor sense, meaning that it goes much more towards the woods. It gets a little bit of a smokiness from like a vetiver. It gets a little bit more of a smokiness from an incense. Overall, again, it doesn't really change in mood. The mood is very relaxing, it's very delicate, it's very serene. When I think about this scent, I picture the color beige, like a very light beige, like white or light beige. And these beautiful, maybe trees that are shaken by the wind, but you don't really hear the wind. You just see them moving almost in a dance. Super beautiful stuff. It's incredibly evocative, especially after this opening fades off, because again, that's a little bit of a flame that's unnecessary in my opinion. But as the opening fades off, you get this insanely evocative, very relaxing, very zen type mood. I really like it a lot. I love wearing this. I've never been to Japan, so I don't really have first-hand experience with this sort of thing, but I've consumed enough media about Japan, movies, books, and any kind of like imagery. I really like Japanese photography, by the way. Then I have a pretty good idea, although it might be a second-hand idea, of what Japan is like. And I perceive the scent as quiet, as I said, and maybe this quiet is this lack of like first-hand experience, first-person perspective. And from this perfume, I get a very relaxing type of feeling, yes, but almost to an oppressive degree, almost if you like stuff cotton balls in your ears. Yes, it's beautiful and quiet, but you feel that something is there. You feel the weight of the silence in a way. And this kind of gives me that. Maybe I have to experience it firsthand. Maybe I have to experience Japan again. I really want to go to Japan, by the way. I just haven't had time. It's such a time-intensive type of travel. But yeah, it's beautiful, but it has this weird aura about it. Obviously, this oppressiveness that I feel, it might be subjective, and it definitely fades off as the perfume dries down. It might be that sweetness there in the opening that is a little bit overwhelming. As you may know, I'm not a huge fan of sweet perfumes. That being said, I really can't complain. I'm kind of nitpicking here. But overall, this is a beautiful, meditative, relaxing type of scent, which I really advise. The opening is strange. I would not necessarily recommend it to someone new to perfumery, but to someone that is a little bit more versed in niche and that has a little bit more artistic expectations, or maybe can understand more artistic intent, go for it. This is a must smell. We have to touch upon the practicalities because I do that in every video. But as I mentioned, I don't really see Meo Fusciuni's perfumes as practical. I feel them as art pieces and I think of them as art pieces. But nonetheless, the longevity and performance of this are pretty good. They're not completely mind-blowing. The longevity, I would say, is about 6 to 7 hours, about average, especially for a scent profile of this style. There's nothing really heavy about it that hangs around too much. And it smells very, very natural. It doesn't smell like there's any sort of artificial compound in here to like enhance the presence or the longevity. The projection curve, as I mentioned, can be a little bit better tuned in my opinion. It's super loud in the beginning for the first 15 to 20 minutes and then just drops off a cliff and it becomes a skin scent. So if you like one aspect or the other, you will kind of have to suffer through either one or the other. I recommend approaching this as a skin scent or more as a skin scent type of perfume, which has a very beautiful lingering aura around you, a very beautiful sillage. And you have to just kind of like put up with the opening in a way. It doesn't last long, it's okay, it's beautiful, it's really weird. I don't think that it really fits the profile, but overall it's there and you can't really do anything about it. When it comes to versatility and use cases, Sogni is actually quite versatile and quite functional. It has a subtle type of elegance, subtle type of presence that really goes well in most situations. You can wear this day to night and you can wear this casual to elegant. It really suits every sort of environment. It's never shouty, it's never overwhelming. This is absolutely not offensive to anyone. I wouldn't necessarily categorize this as mass appealing because it is a little bit more of a niche, weird scent profile. Again, you're getting very soft, creamy woods. You're getting this weird rice accord, which fades off, but it has a very beige type of look. This is definitely not a smell good fragrance, no matter how versatile it is. You might pass as smelling good, but it's definitely an unconventional type of smell, so you have to be aware of that. Overall, I think that this is incredibly wearable though. You can probably signature scent this and have absolutely zero problems. Even when it comes to seasons, this is very, very versatile. You can wear this year round. In the summer, it comes across as clean, subtle, elegant, and in the winter has enough punch to cut through the cold and to give you a little bit of a warm tea or chai latte tea type of feeling. It's really beautiful. It's really, really functional, surprisingly functional. Demographics wise, this is first and foremost absolutely unisex, 100% unisex. Anyone could wear this. Age wise is a little bit more of a mixed bag. This is super abstract, very, very niche, and has a simple yet unusual scent profile, so you have to be into niche. I really can't see a more youthful crowd wearing this unless you're specifically impressed by more unusual, delicate type of smells. But if you're a little bit more mature scent-wise and you can appreciate the quality and the intent behind this niche scent, yeah, you can probably wear this to your grave. No age restrictions whatsoever. When it comes to imagery and narration, to me, Meo Fusciuni is pretty much second to none, just because he is so intentional. He puts it all in front of you. It's impossible to ignore his story. Some may say, as I also mentioned in my last video, that art like this should not require such extensive description, but I just can't help but applaud his approach and his effort to really convey a message. I really like this aspect. To me, again, this is very, very transportive, not necessarily to Japan, because again, I haven't really been there, but to a very relaxing type of place and to a relaxing type of time. A time which might even be in the future where I'm completely at ease and at peace and really appreciate life as a whole and the simplicity of life at that. And in fact, this is actually the aspect that I decided to leverage when I'm going to talk about my option. Riding that segue all the way into this part of the video, this is where I talk about some options for the fragrance that I'm reviewing. In the case of Meo Fusciuni Sogni, I really wanted to leverage the transportative aspect, not necessarily to a place, or rather, there might also be places, but it's mostly to a time. These fragrances really leverage either my youth or just years past, and I picked them out not intentionally looking for that aspect. It just was a complete coincidence. The first one here is Frédéric Malle Synthetic Jungle. This is one of my recent acquisitions. It's an absolutely beautiful, very unique smelling fragrance. It smells like a garden. It smells like a botanical garden. It's so fresh, it's so photorealistic. This is probably one of the most realistic vegetal and gardeny type of smells that I've ever smelled before. And it doesn't smell like a jungle per se. There's nothing tropical in my head about this. This smells like very wet soil, like wet plants, like wet greenery. It's so green, but at the same time, there's some very delicate florals poking their head out. And this really reminds me of when I was a kid and I was tasked to go water this vegetable garden. And I would usually do this in the evening. And this vegetable garden had been baking under the sun the whole day. So everything was warm. The leaves were warm, the soil was warm, and you could really smell all these vegetables here. The tomato specifically, I remember the tomato leaf and the tomato plant scent is insanely vivid in my mind. And when you finally poured water all over it, and when the water would follow these canals that were in the garden, everything would just get this very wet smell, almost like a very dry desert, like soaking up this water. Insanely realistic smell of that. And just the evening air, just everything cooling off, and maybe there's like a little bit of a lingering fog in the evening. Beautiful thing. It beautifully takes me exactly back to those times when I was about, I don't know, maybe 12 to 13. This is insanely photorealistic to me. It was completely unexpected. I bought this because I got this for a very, very good deal online. And when I first sprayed it on, I was like, oh my God, I'm literally there. This is absolutely incredible. It's very realistically green and vegetative. It has a beautiful floral aspect to this, but it's not front and center. This is first and foremost just green leaves that are wet with this dew or mist or something like that. It's absolutely gorgeous. The second fragrance that I want to present you as an option is also insanely evocative to me. This one here is Profumum Roma Arso. I already talked about this in, what was it, Frag Talk episode 1, when I said that this one here was very reminiscent of the forest outside of Rome, the forest which is between Rome and the sea. And it's a pine forest, but like a marine pine forest, not your mountain pine forest. Rome is not a mountainous area whatsoever. And every time I spray this, I get immediately transported to that forest. And this is no winter forest by all means. There's no winter hut, there's no fire going. Rome is not that place. The imagery that I get for this is a hot summer evening in the forest there, and you can smell the resins, you can smell the residual heat, you can hear the cicadas in the background. Everything is sort of quieting down from the day, except these super loud cicadas, which I'll take to my grave in my memory. And I'm kind of happy they're not here in the mountains of Switzerland where I live, because that was a symbol of heat. And again, this is also reminiscent of that heat, that summer heat, that kind of like humid heat. This is a very humid, very heavy type of scent, although the wear experience is subtle and understated. It's a very beautiful, evocative scent to me. A little bit misunderstood maybe from the community. It seems that most people associate this to winter and to a winter forest and campfires. I have none of that imagery whatsoever. Probably wear this year round just because it reminds me of that summer in the pine forest. And I specifically say summer because the things that I get from this are the humidity and the residual heat, because the resins really bloom in that heat, and this has the same exact smell of that. The last fragrance I want to showcase is my usual oddball, and in this case it's Francesca Bianchi's Sex and the Sea. This took a little bit to click for me. I was immediately reminded of something, but I couldn't remember what it was. It was always like on the tip of my tongue. And every time I would wear this, I would get this feeling of like, what is this smell? This is so familiar to me. Until one day it just clicked. This perfectly reminds me of the moment after a day at the beach where you went for the last swim, you're still kind of wet, you still have your bathing suit on, and you're just like heading to the car, and you're all full of sand, you have the residual sunblock on, you put on maybe some cream, everything is just kind of like post-beach time, everything is a little bit wet, and you sit in the hot car, and your swim trunks are on the seat, and everything starts kind of like evaporating, and you get this really funky muskiness, which is a combination of, like, again, wet swim trunks on a hot car seat that has been sitting under the sun the whole day, with kind of like an unwashed muskiness from the sea, a little bit of saltiness, and everything is mixed in with a little bit of sun lotion, a dirty towel. It feels very, very evocative. It doesn't really come across as sex because, again, now that I know this imagery, I can't shake it off my mind. It's not a sexual imagery at all. It's more of a late teen, driving to the beach, coming back in the evening, stopping for an ice cream or for a piece of watermelon. I don't know, it's really beautiful imagery to me, very evocative. It's a symbol of happy times. It's a symbol of good times with friends. I don't know, I really like this. And this is a really weird fragrance, especially for Francesca Bianchi, because it really detours from all of her other offerings, which dry down to her usual Orris concrete or Orris butter type of dry down, which is kind of animalic. This one here goes a lot more musky, but again, it's a really weird muskiness that to me really comes across, and it really reminds me of this dirty, damp beach towel. I can't shake this image off my head. This is exactly what I get when I wear this. Scent is one of the more potent tools that we have to access memories, and for this alone, I will be holding on to this for a very long time. I might not be wearing this a whole lot just because it's a little bit peculiar and not to my taste, with the sort of a coconut feeling. Plus, it's kind of challenging overall, I have to say. I'm not necessarily going to work smelling like a damp towel, but I'm a huge fan of how this triggers my brain into transporting me back to those times. It's good times, it's fun times. I like this a lot. But back to Meo Fusciuni Sogni with my final recommendations and overview. Obviously, you know my verdict. I love this fragrance. I love Meo Fusciuni, and I can definitely recommend you get at least a sample set of Meo Fusciuni. Unfortunately, you will not get the full experience because I'm not really sure if you get those booklets with those sample sets, but you might be able to access that information online, maybe on his websites. If so, do so, because again, referencing the booklets, referencing the descriptions is crucial, at least to me, to get the full Meo Fusciuni experience. Giuseppe Imprezzabile, in my opinion, is a true artist, a true multimedia artist at that. He perfectly combines his beautiful, delicate nature into his fragrances. All of them manage to pull this feeling off. They're all so evocative, so relaxing, so melancholic in a way. I really can't suggest enough you get your nose on Meo Fusciuni, because to me, it's one of the best houses in the niche market today. It's one of the highlights of the niche market today. And I can't even think about any other house that manages to pull off this level of poetry, this level of intent, the way he does. When it comes to Sogni specifically, I think that this is another one of his masterpieces. And if you like the idea of a fragrance talking about Japan and talking about the tranquil life in Japan, you have to give this a go. Do not blind buy this because it's not really blind buy safe. It's a little bit polarizing, it's a little bit weird and abstract, so you might not like it. But you have to at least give it a chance because it's incredibly evocative, incredibly poetic, typical Meo Fusciuni style. Once again, can't recommend this house enough. I'm super biased, yes I know. I am gushing all over this. I'm a huge fanboy, but if my opinion means anything to you, just try it out, try it out. I have nothing to gain. I'm not affiliated, absolutely not. I'm never gonna be affiliated, but it's just that good. If you like this type of content, if you like my approach to video, feel free to subscribe. It's always massively appreciated and it helps the channel. If you want to interact with me, leave a comment, suggestion, opinion, or anything else down below. I always reply and I always keep the conversation open. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for your time. It's never taken for granted. Many more reviews to come, many more videos to come. As usual, see you in the next one, and cheers.